increasingly Wajir and Mandera. So something I can take it up and see the relationship, and thank you, Chair, for bringing this to our attention. But we have already captured it and we are handling it, and hopefully on Monday I'll be in Northeastern, and that will be part of the things that will be taking me there. Thank you. A country's exposure to security threats was limited to land, air, and sea. But now there is a fourth frontier of attack, and the nation can be attacked severely and perhaps even more disastrously, in a more disastrous manner from the cyberspace. And so we set up this task force. This task force had already covered a lot of ground and was supposed to expire and submit a report to the Cabinet Secretary on 17th of August this year. While that task force was about to complete its work, two things happened. One, the attempted attack on the e-citizen platform, which paralyzed and interfered with the activities in that platform for a day or two towards the end of July. Number two, WorldCoin. And those two developments led the ministry and the government to determine there is need to do more substantive work and include these new frontiers of cyber security threats. And for that reason, the task force period has been extended for another 3 months, and their recommendations will be able to help us tackle all the gaps in the law and policy around this area. But in the meantime, in a summary, Chair, the gaps at the moment are around the registration of companies, and entities that want to be data controllers or data processors under the Data Protection Act. The kind of documents that are supposed to be presented before a company or an entity is registered as a data controller or data processor, the issues around eligibility for issuance of certificates as a data controller or processor. We believe the law needs to clarify, amplify, and make it a bit rigorous. Not everybody should be able to collect data and control data for the same reason, as I have said. The same way the country's security today is being threatened beyond the three traditional areas of land, air, and sea, with now cyberspace coming on board. The same way, in a similar way, in a similar manner, data is becoming the gold of the future. What gold was to the economies of the 18th and 19th century is what data is going to be. Whoever controls and processes data is going to be holding into very valuable assets. So it should not be easy that anybody can come simply because they have an inducement and start processing the data of people and controlling that data. So the process of registering those who control data, those who process data, should be made more rigorous under our laws. Two, foreign companies seeking to become data controllers, data processors, the kind of documents and eligibility criteria should even be harsher. They should be harsher than the eligibility criteria of companies and entities of the people of Kenya. And the reasons are for reasons of national sovereignty. It is actually something we need to reflect on. And I know, Chair, I've had this discussion elsewhere. in a different space. Data being what it is today, a crucial asset, a crucial tool that can be used not only for good purposes like commerce and business decisions, but data can be used to harm. So a foreign entity, a foreign company, or even a Kenyan company or entity which is associated or has allegiance to a foreign entity must be treated with a lot of rigor before they are allowed to process, retain, and control data of the people of Kenya. What worries me as the minister responsible for the security of our country in this particular matter was the kind of data that was being harvested. Because the scanning of iris is one of the most intrusive data harvesting methods. There are other methods, but the scanning of the eyes is quite intrusive. It's deeply intrusive. Number two, experts say that the biological consequences of that intrusion, it could be disastrous. It could be life-threatening. So from where I sit, Chair and members, I think we should be very careful with allowing foreigners to access, control, process, and retain the data of the people of Kenya for the reasons I've given. Number three, the current law does not pronounce itself on circumstances when data controllers and or data processors give incentives to induce subjects to provide data and the punishment for inducement. In other words, should a data processor or controller use an inducement as a way of obtaining the consent of the person from whom data is harvested? And therefore the question that in our investigations we would want to establish is, besides the gap being there, is whether the consent of the Kenyans that gave consent for their iris to be scanned was informed consent, voluntary consent, or it was consent obtained through inducement and undue influence. And the lawyer's chair will tell you that whether or not the consensual contracts were signed, the contracts of consent, any contracts obtained through either duress, inducement,